a bronze computing device from ancient Greece that calculates planetary motion using a differential gear, a mechanism officially invented in the 16th century. A clay pot from ancient Iraq that generates measurable electric current when filled with vinegar. A wooden bird from an Egyptian tomb that produces 4 times its own weight in lift when placed in a wind tunnel. A crystal lens from ancient Assyria that functions as a telescope eyepiece today, found in a palace that predates the telescope by 24 centuries. These are not legends. They are physical objects on physical shelves, and everyone has been tested with modern equipment. The mainstream explanation, in most cases, is that we are not sure. Every machine on this list turned up by accident, found by people who were looking for something else entirely. None came with instructions. Some came with no historical record at all. What connects all 7 is not material, not geography, not era. It is capability. Each one demonstrates engineering that the civilization which produced it had no documented path to reach. Here are the 7 ancient machine discoveries that shocked scientists. We start in the year 1900 in the Aegean Sea, 45 meters underwater, where a Greek sponge diver accidentally pulled the oldest computer on Earth out of a shipwreck. His name was Elias Stadiatos, and he was 45 meters down when he saw them. The helmet pressed against his face. The water was cold enough to feel through the suit. He was collecting sponges near the island of Antikythera when the shapes materialized in the sand below. Pale, scattered, human-sized. He surfaced faster than he should have and told his captain there were bodies on the seabed. His captain dove himself, stayed longer, and came up with a different story. What Stadiatos had mistaken for corpses were marble statues, and behind them, buried under 2,000 years of silt, sat the wreck of a Roman cargo ship. Divers hauled up bronze sculptures, see glass bowls, pottery, coins, jewelry. Among everything they brought to the surface was a corroded bronze lump roughly the size of a shoebox, fused solid by 2 millennia of seawater. Nobody paid it attention. Workers crated it to the National Archaeological Museum in Athens, where it waited for nearly 2 years while researchers studied the statues. On May 17, 1902, a politician named Spiridon Stais noticed a hairline crack across the surface. Through the crack, he could see a gear. Inside that corroded mass, researchers eventually found 37 interlocking bronze gears. The device measures 33 centimeters tall and 17 centimeters wide, roughly the dimensions of a thick laptop. The largest gear carries 223 individually cut teeth. Together, those gears tracked the sun, the moon, and all 5 planets visible to the naked eye simultaneously. The mechanism predicted solar and lunar eclipses using a 223-month cycle accurate to within hours across a 33-year window, and tracked 4 separate athletic calendars, including the timing of the Olympic Games. The lunar section went further still. The moon moves faster at certain points of its elliptical orbit than at others, a variable requiring calculus to model mathematically. This mechanism modeled it in bronze, using a pin-and-slot epicyclic gear train that physically added and subtracted velocities inside the casing. That type of differential gear was officially invented in 16th century Europe. The gap between that invention and this device is almost exactly 2,000 years. In 2024, the researchers at the University of Glasgow applied statistical techniques developed to detect gravitational waves, ripples in space-time from colliding black holes, to analyze the device's calendar ring. Their finding: 354 holes, positioned to a tolerance of 1/3 of a millimeter, confirming it tracked the lunar year with manufacturing precision that should not have existed in 150 BC. Roman philosopher Cicero, writing in the 1st century BC, described a nearly identical device built by Archimedes in Syracuse. That means this mechanism was not a one-off invention. It was a survivor from a tradition of mechanical computing that once existed and then vanished entirely. Exactly one specimen made it to the present day. What happened to everything else that tradition produced has never been answered. June 1936. A construction crew breaking ground for a railway line outside Baghdad strikes something ceramic 2 miles northeast of the city. The site neighbors the ruins of Ctesiphon, ancient capital of both the Parthian and Sassanid empires across 8 centuries. Wilhelm König, the Austrian-born director of the Iraq Museum's laboratory, arrives to examine what the foreman unearthed. A clay jar, 14 centimeters tall, the height of a smartphone standing upright. Inside it, nested with deliberate precision, sits a copper cylinder rolled from sheet metal. Inside that cylinder, suspended without touching the walls, hangs a thin iron rod. Bitumen seals the entire assembly at the top. König stares at the configuration for a long time. Then he goes back to his office and starts writing. The 3 components, jar, cylinder, and rod, are electrically isolated from each other by the asphalt plug. In 1938, König publishes a paper with a question mark in its title. A galvanic element from the Parthian period? He cannot prove it is a battery. He cannot explain it any other way. In 1940, American scientist Willard Gray at General Electric builds an exact replica and fills it with grape juice. The device produces measurable electric current immediately. No modifications, no additional components. In 2005, the Mythbusters program connects several replicas in series and measures approximately 4 volts of combined output, sufficient for basic electroplating. Chemical analysis of the original corrosion patterns confirmed an acidic organic substance inside the jar, consistent with wine or vinegar serving as an electrolyte. Alessandro Volta presented his electrochemical cell to the Royal Society of London on March 20, 1800, and received full credit as the battery's inventor. The Baghdad jar predates that moment by somewhere between 1,400 and 2,200 years. No electroplated objects from the same period have been archaeologically confirmed in the region. No written record describes the jar's purpose. Mainstream archaeologists propose the jars held sacred scrolls or protective spells, and that the acidic residue came from decomposing organic matter over centuries underground. Both explanations fit the physical evidence. Only one involves generating electricity 2,000 years ahead of schedule. The original jar was looted from the Iraq Museum during the 2003 invasion. Its location is unknown, and the chance to analyze it with modern technology is gone permanently. In 1898, Victor Loret's team breaks the seal on the Padi Emin tomb at Saqqara and works through the inventory methodically. Canopic jars, funerary figurines, ritual objects. One small wooden piece gets turned over briefly, labeled Bird Model, and filed in a storage case at the Egyptian Museum in Cairo. It sits in a cabinet among dozens of carved birds for the next 71 years. In 1969, Dr. Khalil Messiha, an Egyptian physician and member of both the Royal Aeromodelers Club and Egyptian Aeronautical Club, walks past that cabinet and stops. He asks to have the object removed from the case. Every other carved bird in that cabinet has feet. This one has none. Every other carved bird shows incised feathers. This one has none. Every bird in nature has a horizontal tail controlling pitch and flight. This object has a vertical tail fin. No bird species on Earth carries a vertical tail fin. Every fixed-wing aircraft ever built does. Wingspan, exactly 18 centimeters, the distance from your wrist to your fingertip. Weight, 39 grams, less than a golf ball. Material, sycamore wood, carved from a single piece. The wings extend at a slight downward angle, a configuration called anhedral, which generates aerodynamic lift and stability. Aviation expert Simon Sanderson builds a replica and mounts it in a university wind tunnel without any tail stabilizer. The unmodified object generates 4 times its own weight in lift, the same efficiency ratio used to evaluate modern aircraft wings. When a horizontal tailplane is added and the replica runs through Liverpool University's flight simulator under Egyptian atmospheric conditions, it flies. Near the original tomb, a papyrus fragment carries 3 words: "I want to fly." Glider designer Martin Grigori builds his own replica and disagrees. The object is unstable without a tailplane, and even with one added, the glide is disappointing. His conclusion: a child's toy or a weather vane. The weather vane theory collapses immediately. No holes, no mounting points, no attachment mechanism appear anywhere on the object. The toy theory has a harder problem. Egyptian craftsmen did not carve single-piece sycamore objects at this dimensional precision without intention. The label in room 22 of the Cairo Museum still reads "Bird Model," and no further explanation has been added since 1898. Descend the stairs beneath the Temple of Hathor at Dendera, and the world above closes quickly. The corridor narrows until both palms press flat against opposite walls. The ceiling drops until a tall person must bend at the neck. The air is cooler than the temple above. Still old, and carrying the faint mineral smell of limestone that has not been disturbed in centuries. On the walls of these crypts, accessible only to the temple's highest priests, 5 stone reliefs carry a carving that has divided researchers for 50 years. In 3 of the reliefs, a human figure holds an elongated oval object overhead. Inside the oval, a wavy line runs end to end. A cable-like form extends from the base to a small, kneeling figure beside a pedestal. A 2-armed pillar stands alongside. To an Egyptologist, and this is a creation myth. The serpent god Harsamtis, emerging from a lotus flower inside the womb of the sky goddess Nut, carried on a solar barge. To an electrical engineer, it is a Crookes tube, a vacuum discharge lamp connected to an insulated base by a conducting cable. Electrical engineer Walter Garn built a working model from the exact elements shown: glass vessel, metal rod, evacuated air. When internal pressure dropped sufficiently, a luminous snake-like filament appeared along the rod, glowing in low-pressure plasma. Garn stated the result matched the carvings precisely. Egyptologist Wolfgang Weitkus translated every inscription surrounding the reliefs. They describe a divine ceremony on a solar barge. No lamp, no wire, no power source appears in any translation. Neither explanation closes cleanly. If the carving is pure religious symbolism, why does physically reproducing its elements produce plasma luminescence with no modification? If it depicts a working lamp, why does that lamp appear exactly once in all of Egyptian history? In a crypt with no power source, no manufacturing chain, and no glass production record? The ceiling above the Dendera temple crypts carries no soot. Either these chambers were never lit, which raises its own questions about how the carvings were made, or they were lit by a method that left no residue. Both possibilities require an answer that has not arrived. July 3, 1908. Luigi Pernier clears a side chamber beneath the Minoan palace of Phaistos on Crete's southern coast. The room holds black earth, ash, and charred bovine bones, residue of a ritual nobody can now identify. Pernier's brush finds something flat and circular in the debris. He lifts it carefully, a fired clay disc, 16 centimeters across, the width of a large coffee mug, and 2 centimeters thick, heavier than it appears. Both faces carry a continuous spiral of stamped symbols pressed into the clay before firing. Pernier has excavated Minoan sites for years. He has never seen these symbols. In the 117 years since that morning, neither has anyone else. The disc carries 241 symbol impressions from a set of 45 unique signs. Every symbol was pressed using a pre-carved individual stamp. One stamp, one impression, and repeated across both faces in deliberate sequence before the clay hardened. That process makes the Phaistos Disc the earliest confirmed example of movable type printing, predating Gutenberg by over 3,000 years. The clay itself originated outside Crete based on mineralogical analysis. The script matches no known ancient writing system, not Linear A, not Linear B, not Egyptian hieroglyphics, not Hittite, not Greek. The Rosetta Stone unlocked Egyptian hieroglyphics within 23 years of its 1799 discovery because it repeated the same text in 3 known scripts, giving researchers a fixed comparison point. The Phaistos Disc offers no such anchor. This is the only object in existence carrying this script. As of 2024, linguist Dr. Gareth Owens claims to have decoded 99% of the content after 30 years of study. Concluding it is a prayer to a mother goddess. The broader academic community has not verified this reading. The stamps required to produce this disc demanded skilled labor to carve before a single impression could be pressed. That investment points to a system built for repeated use. Multiple documents, multiple runs. You do not engineer movable type to make one disc. The other documents are gone. In 1850, Sir Austen Henry Layard clears the throne room of Assyrian King Sargon II at the Palace of Nimrud in what is now northern Iraq, a room sealed for 25 centuries. Among the objects Layard lifts from the debris sits a small oval of polished rock crystal, roughly 38 millimeters across, the diameter of a large coin. Back in England, physicist Sir David Brewster examines its geometry and identifies it as an optical lens ground to a focal length of approximately 11 centimeters. The telescope was officially invented by Dutch spectacle maker Hans Lippershey in 1608. The object in Brewster's hands was made in 750 BC. The Nimrud lens functions as a 3 times magnifying glass, the same power as the loupe a jeweler uses to examine inclusions in gemstones. Rock crystal does not degrade optically over time the way manufactured glass does, meaning this lens performs today exactly as it performed when the Assyrian craftsmen finished grinding it. Pick it up and you can read through it right now. Italian scientist Giovanni Pettinato of the University of Rome proposed in the 1990s that the lens formed part of an Assyrian telescope, and that this resolved a long-standing puzzle in Babylonian astronomy. The ancient Assyrians described Saturn as a deity surrounded by a ring of serpents. Saturn's rings are not visible to the naked eye. When Galileo first observed Saturn through his 17th century telescope in 1610, he could not resolve the rings as rings either. They appeared as 2 symmetrical lobes flanking the planet. A crude telescope using the Nimrud lens would produce exactly that blurred, elongated artifact. Something an ancient observer might record as a serpent encircling a god. Robert Temple cataloged more than 450 ancient optical objects in museum collections worldwide, most of them rock crystal, most in storage. Schliemann found 48 crystal lenses at Troy in a single excavation. The Nimrud lens is not an anomaly. It is the most visible member of a very large group. The British Museum's official label states the lens would have been of little or no practical use, and that its optical properties were probably accidental. Pettinato's counter is direct. If Assyrian astronomers recorded detailed knowledge of phenomena invisible to the naked eye, then the simplest explanation is that they were not relying solely on the naked eye, and chose not to document the instrument the way craftsmen rarely document their most ordinary tools. The lens came from the throne room of a king. Decorative inlays were common in Assyrian palaces. An impractical, poorly ground piece of crystal was not. Nobody has satisfactorily explained why a craftsman would spend the hours required to grind rock crystal to optical tolerances for purely decorative purposes. June 2023. A volunteer with the Norton Disney History and Archaeology Group works a trowel through topsoil in a Lincolnshire field where Roman coins have turned up before. The trowel meets resistance. He clears the soil by hand, millimeter by millimeter. What emerges is a hollow bronze object the size of a clenched fist. 12 flat pentagonal faces, a circular hole of a different diameter cut into each face, and a small rounded knob projecting from every corner. He calls across the field to the group's secretary, Richard Parker, who looks down at what sits in the volunteer's palm and says, "Oh my goodness, you have found a dodecahedron. I have only ever read about these." Parker has read about them because they have been turning up across northern Europe since 1739, and when the first recorded example reached the Society of Antiquaries of London, after surfacing from a field in Hertfordshire. Over 130 have been catalogued since. Grave sites, military camps, public baths, a theater, a coin hoard, a riverbed. They appear across contexts with no consistent pattern. Size ranges from 4 centimeters, a golf ball, to 11 centimeters, slightly larger than a baseball. Every example is cast in bronze alloy using the lost wax method, which requires a trained metalworker and a preformed model. Not one carries wear marks consistent with regular practical use. The geographic pattern is exact. Dodecahedra have turned up in France, Germany, Belgium, the Netherlands, Britain, Austria, Switzerland, and Hungary, all territories on the northwestern edge of the Roman Empire, predominantly Celtic-rooted regions. Never in Italy, never in Spain, never in North Africa, never in Greece, never anywhere in the Mediterranean heartland of Roman civilization. A silver example recovered from Geneva in 1982 carried the Latin names of all 12 zodiac signs, one per face. More than 50 academic theories have been published attempting to explain the function. Candlestick holders, dice, artillery rangefinders, glove knitting tools, fortune-telling devices, religious amulets, guild certification objects, children's toys, agricultural calendar instruments. None has achieved consensus. The Romans documented everything with extraordinary thoroughness. Their medical texts name individual surgical instruments. Their military manuals specify the exact dimensions of camp fortifications. Their cookbooks list spice quantities. Their legal records preserve the sale price of specific fish on specific market days in specific cities. We have the names of Roman cobblers. We have the wages of Roman mosaic workers. We have complaint letters from Roman soldiers about the quality of their socks. We do not have a single written reference, in Latin, in Greek, in any language, on any surface, from any location across 5 centuries of Roman record keeping, that names, describes, depicts, or mentions a dodecahedron. An object present in over 130 locations across the breadth of the empire produced no paper trail in the most comprehensive administrative system the ancient world ever built. Researchers at Belgium's Gallo-Roman Museum propose the object served magical ritual practice, which would explain the silence precisely. When Rome formally adopted Christianity, documenting pagan ritual became legally dangerous. Practitioners destroyed records. Objects went underground rather than on display. On this reading, the silence in the archive is not evidence of insignificance. It is evidence of the opposite, that these objects mattered enough to conceal, and that the people who used them were disciplined enough to leave nothing written behind. 7 objects, 7 cultures, 6 countries, more than 3,000 years of history. But by the end of this list, one pattern becomes impossible to ignore. Every object was discovered by accident. Elias Stadiatos found the Antikythera Mechanism while sheltering from a storm beneath the Aegean Sea. Railway workers uncovered the Baghdad Battery. The Saqqara Bird sat in a museum cabinet for 71 years because it was dismissed as a toy. The Dendera reliefs remained hidden inside a crypt almost nobody entered. The Phaistos Disc came from a side chamber that was never considered important. The Nimrud Lens was pulled from a pile of decorative fragments. The Roman Dodecahedron surfaced from an ordinary field in England. Nobody was searching for any of them. That means the real question is not whether more objects like these exist. The real question is, how many are still buried underground, hidden in storage crates, sitting in museum basements, or resting at the bottom of oceans that have never been fully explored? These discoveries do not prove ancient aliens. They prove something more uncomfortable. Our understanding of the ancient world is limited by what survived, what was found, and whether the right person recognized it in time. If this video made you think, subscribe, because the next discovery may already be waiting underground. And if you enjoyed this journey, hit like so this reaches someone who may one day be the person holding the shovel.